It was a Tuesday evening, and the air crackled with a special kind of excitement, mixed with a palpable tension. The highly anticipated Nation's Pulse debate show was live, and tonight's lineup was nothing short of extraordinary, promising a clash of titans that America wouldn't soon forget. On one side, Kash Patel, a name synonymous with sharp, often unyielding political discourse. He was known to many as the former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, a position that had forged him into a man of iron will and firm beliefs. His public persona was one of relentless determination, his voice often a booming declaration of his convictions, his confidence unwavering even when facing fierce opposition. He rarely smiled on camera, his serious demeanor, often marked by a furrowed brow, suggesting a mind constantly grappling with weighty national matters. People knew him as someone who didn't back down, a formidable debater, and a fighter for what he believed was right, no matter how unpopular his opinions might be among certain circles. He had built a reputation for being tough, uncompromising, and fiercely loyal to his principles. On the other side sat Samuel L. Jackson, an icon of American cinema. His presence was immediately calming, a stark contrast to Kash Patel's intense aura. Samuel L. Jackson wasn't typically seen in political debates. His fame stemmed from a long, storied career in film, where his powerful voice and calm, yet commanding presence had captivated audiences worldwide. He had a unique ability to fill a room with his voice, making every word resonate, and his eyes, deep and expressive, seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. In public, he usually appeared cool, collected, and spoke with a thoughtful, measured tone, whether discussing his latest movie or the social issues he cared about. Tonight, however, he was stepping onto a different stage, one far removed from Hollywood glamour, to discuss something fundamental to the nation. The show's host, Maria Chen, a calm, intelligent, and highly respected journalist known for her ability to navigate even the most heated discussions, sat gracefully between them. The topic for the night was weighty, the role of public trust in modern society. It was a broad, serious subject, allowing for many angles of discussion, and both men were known to hold deeply entrenched, often opposing views. The studio was packed to capacity, every seat filled, the bright lights casting a theatrical glow, and cameras were strategically positioned to capture every nuance. Millions of people across America were tuned in, watching from their living rooms, kitchens, and local bars, buzzing with anticipation for what was expected to be a lively, possibly explosive, discussion. The nation collectively leaned forward, ready for the intellectual fireworks. Maria began by steering the conversation toward Kash Patel, inviting him to share his perspective on the critical issue of trust in government institutions. Kash, seizing the moment, launched into his views with characteristic clarity and strong, decisive language. He spoke passionately about the foundational importance of citizens believing in their leaders, their laws, and the systems designed to uphold order. He emphasized the necessity of strict rules, unwavering adherence to established procedures, and the vital role of ensuring that every aspect of governance functioned flawlessly. His voice, though steady and controlled at first, carried an undeniable undercurrent of conviction. He used his hands to punctuate his arguments, his gestures sharp and precise as he sliced the air to emphasize key ideas. He articulated how, in his view, a firm, even unwavering, hand was sometimes indispensable to guide the country through turbulent times, and that often, the hard truths required for national stability were unpopular but absolutely necessary for the greater good. He spoke of the harsh realities of a complex world, where decisive action, even if met with resistance, was paramount. Then, Maria gracefully shifted her attention to Samuel L. Jackson, inviting him to offer his counterpoint. Samuel leaned forward slightly, his famous voice, now calm and deeply resonant, filled the studio. He approached the concept of trust from an entirely different angle, articulating it as something organic, built from the very fabric of society, from the ground up. He spoke about trust being woven from countless small acts of kindness, from the deliberate act of listening intently to every voice, from ensuring that all perspectives, no matter how humble or grand, were heard and acknowledged. He eschewed complex political jargon, opting instead for simple, relatable examples: the daily act of trusting your neighbor to return a borrowed tool, or the profound belief one places in the innocence of a child's story. He spoke eloquently about the essential nature of empathy, about the profound importance of understanding another's viewpoint, and how trust, in its purest form, was a delicate, fragile entity that demanded constant, tender care and nurturing. To illustrate his point about the quiet power of shared understanding, he recounted a personal anecdote, a small, touching tale from his own life about a community coming together during a time of need, proving that unity could emerge from collective vulnerability. His words flowed like a smooth, clear river, calming and steady, offering a stark contrast to Kash's more forceful pronouncements. As the debate progressed, they moved through various facets of the public trust topic, touching on national security, economic policy, and social cohesion. Kash, rooted in his background, spoke with conviction about the urgent need for robust national security measures and impenetrable borders, often citing statistics and historical precedents. Samuel, conversely, focused on the intrinsic value of community, advocating for policies and attitudes that ensured every citizen felt safe, respected, and valued within their own homes and neighborhoods, emphasizing lived experiences over abstract data. While they managed to find superficial agreement on a few minor points, their fundamental disagreements on the major issues remained stark and pronounced. Kash frequently referred to tangible facts, measurable data, and concrete policies, approaching the subject with a methodical, almost clinical precision. Samuel, on the other hand, delved into the realm of human feelings, personal experiences, and the intangible qualities that define human connection, often speaking from the heart. The energy within the studio began to subtly, yet perceptibly, shift. Kash's intensity visibly heightened. He started to interrupt Samuel more frequently, his interjections becoming sharper, his voice growing incrementally louder, determined to make his points penetrate more forcefully. His face flushed a deeper red with each exchange, and his hand gestures grew more expansive, more emphatic. He clearly felt that Samuel was being too idealistic, too soft, perhaps failing to grasp the real dangers and harsh realities that he believed permeated the world. He perceived Samuel's ideas as impractical, lacking the necessary toughness for the complex and often brutal global landscape. He wanted to push back, to assert the irrefutable strength of his own arguments, to dominate the narrative. He leaned further forward, almost rising from his seat, his eyes fixed on Samuel with an unwavering, almost challenging gaze. Samuel, however, remained utterly unruffled. He maintained his composure, listening patiently, sometimes offering a slow, thoughtful nod, at other times simply observing Kash with an expression of quiet contemplation. He waited for his designated turn to speak, and when he did, his voice remained remarkably even, though a hint of profound sadness seemed to flicker in his eyes. He appeared to possess a deep understanding of Kash's anger, yet he refused to allow it to disrupt his own inner peace. He continued to articulate his philosophy of connection, of diligently seeking common ground, even in the throes of vehement disagreement. He held a steadfast belief that even when individuals were consumed by anger, there was always an inherent pathway to reach them, to uncover and appeal to a shared sense of humanity that transcended their immediate frustrations. His stillness became a powerful counterpoint to Kash's escalating agitation. The debate, which had been building to an inevitable climax, was nearing its conclusion, and the tension in the studio had become almost suffocating. Maria Chen, sensing the charged atmosphere, had just posed her final, encapsulating question: what truly unites America in these fractured times? Samuel L. Jackson had just delivered his poignant concluding remarks, his voice quiet but resonating with an undeniable firmness, about how shared dreams and aspirations, rather than common fears or manufactured divisions, served as the true, enduring glue that bound people together. Then, it was Kash Patel's turn, and the air crackled with anticipation. He looked directly at Samuel, his eyes narrowing to slits, his face now a vivid crimson. It was clear he had reached a breaking point, a moment where his simmering frustration would finally erupt. The main camera zoomed in tightly on his face, capturing every nuance of his rising fury. He took a deep, shuddering breath, and then, his voice suddenly rising to a piercing crescendo, he exploded. "You know what?" Kash spat, his voice laced with venom, his finger jabbing accusingly at Samuel. His words were loud, raw, and seething with anger, tearing through the carefully maintained calm of the studio like a violent storm. "You and your ideas, your whole way of thinking, it doesn't belong here. It's not real. It's not how the world works. You belong in a cage." The two chilling words hung in the air, cold, harsh, and utterly devastating. They were a direct assault, a deliberate attempt to strip Samuel not just of his dignity, but of his very humanity. A collective gasp, audible even over the live broadcast, rippled through the stunned studio audience. Maria Chen's eyes widened dramatically, and for a fleeting moment, even she, the seasoned journalist, seemed to freeze, her composure shattering under the weight of the unexpected aggression. A shocked, almost terrifying silence descended upon the studio, broken only by the faint hum of equipment. The crew members behind the cameras exchanged horrified glances, their faces a mixture of disbelief, horror, and a dawning realization of the magnitude of what had just transpired. The insult was so personal, so completely out of line for a public debate. It transcended mere disagreement, becoming an attempt to dehumanize, to exile someone completely from the realm of polite, rational interaction. It was as if an invisible, sacred line had been violently crossed, a fundamental boundary of decorum smashed into a million pieces. The millions watching at home must have felt the same visceral shock, a collective jolt of dismay. You could almost hear the nationwide intake of breath, a unified gasp of outrage and disbelief echoing across every state. All eyes, both in the studio and across the vast expanse of America, were now fixed, utterly transfixed, on Samuel L. Jackson. The collective expectation was palpable. Everyone anticipated a furious retaliation. They expected him to lash out, to yell back with equal or greater force, to get visibly, justifiably angry, perhaps even to rise from his seat and walk off the set in protest. After all, this was Samuel L. Jackson, a man revered for his formidable on-screen presence, often portraying characters who would react to such a blatant insult with explosive fury and righteous indignation. The entire nation held its breath, braced for the inevitable storm to break. But Samuel L. Jackson did none of those things. He didn't flinch, not even a muscle in his face betrayed a reaction. He didn't raise his voice, not even a tremor in his posture suggested a surge of anger. He didn't even look angry. Instead, with a deliberation that felt profound, a very slow, almost impossibly gentle smile began to form on his face. It was not a mocking smile, nor was it bitter or resentful. It was a sad, deep, and knowing smile, one that seemed to carry the weight of vast experience. He looked at Kash Patel, not with anger, but with an expression that looked remarkably like understanding. Or perhaps something deeper, closer to pity for the anger consuming the other man. Then, with a quiet grace, he turned his gaze from Kash to the main camera, looking directly into the lens, into the eyes of the millions of individuals watching him from their living rooms across the entire nation. His voice, when it finally came, was not loud, but it was astonishingly clear, cutting through the thick, shocked silence with more sheer power than any shout could have mustered. It was the same deep, resonant, calm voice so familiar from his iconic movies, but now it carried an incredible weight, an emotional gravity that made every single word sink deep into the listener's consciousness. "A cage," he said, slowly, allowing each syllable to hang in the air. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet paradoxically, it filled every corner of the vast studio and every living room across America with an undeniable presence. "Interesting. You know, Mr. Patel, a cage is a structure. A place we painstakingly build, usually with great effort, for one purpose, to hold things. To keep things inside, to prevent them from moving freely, from soaring, from exploring. To control them. It's a tool, isn't it? Used for things we perhaps fear might be too wild, too unpredictable, too free for our comfort." He paused, a master of timing, allowing his words to settle, to resonate in the stunned silence. Kash Patel, who had been breathing heavily with agitation just moments before, now sat perfectly still, almost rigid, his mouth slightly ajar in a posture of profound bewilderment. The fiery anger that had consumed his face had completely drained away, replaced now by a mixture of confusion and perhaps a faint, dawning flicker of shame. Samuel continued, his voice maintaining its gentle timbre, yet gaining a quiet, undeniable strength, like a deep river flowing steadily. "But a cage, Mr. Patel, despite its bars and its locks, can only ever truly hold the body. It cannot imprison the mind. It cannot shackle the human spirit. It cannot contain an idea once it has taken root. And it most certainly cannot stop the truth, once spoken, from reaching far, far beyond its narrow confines, beyond its cold, hard bars, to touch the hearts and minds of others." He then gently shifted his gaze back to Kash, his eyes soft, yet intensely direct, devoid of any malice. "Perhaps, Mr. Patel, what you perceive as something that belongs in a cage is simply a way of thinking that, by its very nature, refuses to be confined. A set of beliefs that seeks to expand, to connect with others, to reach out across divides, rather than to shrink back in fear or be walled off by prejudice. And perhaps, if you truly consider it, that's precisely where its greatest power lies. In its boundless nature, in its inherent refusal to be contained or defined by fear, by walls, or by the narrow definitions others try to impose. He took another slow, deliberate breath, then looked back at the camera, a thoughtful, almost serene expression on his face. If belonging in a cage means embracing empathy, if it means diligently listening to every single voice, regardless of how quiet or different, if it means believing in the boundless, transformative power of kindness, and if it means striving for a world where freedom of thought, freedom of spirit, and compassion are truly paramount for every individual, then perhaps, sir, he concluded, his voice soft but unwavering, you're right. Perhaps I do. And if that's the case, then I welcome the company of all the other uncageable spirits out there who simply want to live in peace and understanding, who seek to build bridges and break down walls, rather than construct them. He finished with a small, yet profoundly graceful nod, a gesture of quiet finality. He didn't add another word. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes more than any further rhetoric could have. The silence in the studio stretched on, thick and heavy, for several long, agonizing seconds after Samuel L. Jackson finished speaking. It felt like an eternity. Maria Chen, though still visibly shaken, managed to quickly regain her composure, thanking both guests with a strained smile and promptly ending the live broadcast. But neither the audience nor the millions watching at home were thinking about the show's conclusion. They were grappling with what they had just witnessed. America was, quite simply, stunned. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media platforms exploded within seconds. The digital landscape wasn't filled with anger directed at Samuel, but with an unprecedented wave of awe, admiration, and overwhelming support for his handling of the situation. People began sharing replays of the critical clip, Kash Patel's shocking outburst and Samuel L. Jackson's calm, profoundly articulate response, again and again. The footage went viral at an unimaginable speed, spreading across the internet faster and more widely than almost anything before it. The Cage and the Calm became the unofficial headline, dominating news cycles for days. Major news channels dedicated entire segments to dissecting the exchange. Talk show hosts across the spectrum analyzed every word, every nuance of Samuel's response. Psychologists and communication experts were brought on air to weigh in, universally praising Samuel's incredible composure, his profound wisdom, and his masterful redirection of a hateful personal attack. They spoke of his emotional intelligence and his ability to transform a moment of ugliness into one of teaching. People from all walks of life, transcending typical political divides, found themselves united in their agreement. Samuel L. Jackson had handled an ugly, deeply personal moment with unbelievable grace and dignity. His response was not a counterattack, not a descent into the same level of aggression. It wasn't a political argument designed to win points. It was, at its core, a deeply human response. He had taken a hateful, dehumanizing insult and, with quiet strength, transformed it into a powerful moment of reflection, a profound and quiet challenge to the very idea of forcibly containing or pigeonholing individuals based on their beliefs or identity. His words resonated deeply because they spoke to universal desires for freedom and understanding. Kash Patel, on the other hand, faced an immediate and intense backlash. While a small, vocal segment of his most ardent supporters attempted to defend him, arguing that his words were merely a sign of his passionate convictions, the overwhelming majority of the public, even many who generally aligned with his political views, felt that he had unequivocally crossed a line. His outburst, those two cutting words, "You belong in a cage," were widely perceived as a moment of profound ugliness in public discourse, a stark symbol of how debates could tragically devolve into personal, dehumanizing attacks. He eventually issued a brief, somewhat reluctant, and widely perceived as forced apology a few days later, stating that he regretted his choice of words. However, the damage to his public image was significant and immediate, a clear stain on his previously unyielding persona. Samuel L. Jackson, seemingly by accident, became an unexpected national hero. He didn't seek the role, but his unwavering calm and thoughtful response resonated deeply with millions. People across the country saw it as an extraordinary display of quiet strength, a powerful and much-needed example of how to respond to hate not with more hate, but with dignity, clarity, and an unwavering message of human connection. He was inundated with countless messages of thanks and solidarity, not just from his vast legions of fans, but from ordinary Americans from diverse backgrounds who felt that his words had offered a sliver of hope, a beacon of light, in a time of intense division and vitriol. His message about understanding differences, about finding strength in uniqueness, and about the liberating power of an uncageable spirit became a pervasive talking point in schools, community centers, and countless living room conversations. In the many months that followed that fateful debate, the cage incident became a pervasive reference point in American conversations about civility, respect, the nature of public discourse, and the fundamental right to individual freedom. It served as a stark, enduring reminder that words, once spoken, carry immense power, capable of building up or tearing down, and that true, lasting strength often lies not in shouting the loudest, or in attempting to confine others, but in speaking with profound truth, with unwavering calm, and with an open heart, even when confronted by the most aggressive and hateful anger. Samuel L. Jackson continued his illustrious acting career, but his public presence gained a new, profound depth and significance. He was now seen not just as an iconic actor, but as a genuine voice of reason, a quiet and unexpected leader who, through a single moment of grace, had embodied the very values of empathy, understanding, and unyielding spirit that he had so eloquently spoken about. He became a symbol of dignity in the face of malice. And Kash Patel? He continued his work, his involvement in public life, but the indelible shadow of that night remained. It stood as a potent lesson, not just for him but for countless others who witnessed the event, about the true, heavy cost of unchecked anger, the destructive nature of dehumanizing language, and, conversely, the unexpected, liberating power of a calm, thoughtful, and profoundly human response that refused to be silenced or caged. The debate that night, intended to be a discussion about public trust, ultimately imparted a far deeper, more essential lesson to America about the very essence of humanity itself, all because of one harsh, dehumanizing insult and one incredibly calm, truly shocking, and ultimately inspiring response.